Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm excited to bring to you Robert Joseph, who is he's a spiritual coach. He's a men's coach, and he was introduced to me from one of my best friends, Edwin Arister. Would love to take this opportunity to learn a little bit more about you, why you got into men's coaching, and a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, Davidson, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure. And yeah, I'm happy to tell you a little bit about my own journey and why I do men's work. I'm also a salesperson, which I think your audience might resonate with. I've been in sales for 15 plus years, selling to just about every type of company you can imagine. Right now, large global financial institutions, software, cybersecurity. But going back to men's work for a minute, the reason I got into men's work is I'm 43 years old now. For about 40 years, I got to be honest, I was numb emotionally, right? When it came to relationships, when it came to feeling anything, I don't think I cried for probably 20 plus years.
Wow.
The backstory of that is my father, I'd never seen express any sort of emotion. He was a great man. He still is to this day, and I'm very blessed to have him, but he never expressed emotion. And he's had a very tough life, right? So he worked at Rikers Island
Oh,
in
wow.
the prisons in the 70s and 80s where there was riots. The first day on his job, he was thrown into a riot. Imagine your first day, you're supposed to be there for training, and
Wow.
you're in the middle of a fight, right? So he did that for 20 plus years, and then he came back to the house where my sister was adopted from Korea as an infant, and she had deeply rooted psychological problems.
Mhm.
So he went from one chaotic environment to another.
Yeah.
And now I'm older and I can reflect on it. I think he may have developed some type of PTSD, right?
Mm.
Because he was physically there, but emotionally a shell of himself.
Mm.
So he wasn't there to help, right? He went into isolation. So when I was a child, I did the same thing because as a boy, you model the only man that you know, which is usually also the man that you admire for better or worse, right? And then I got older, and in relationships, I just repeated the same pattern. I couldn't
Mm.
feel emotionally. I couldn't even feel physically sometimes, right?
Wow.
And I realized as I got older how much trauma was stuck in my body, and how many other men who were told not to cry, to dust themselves off, to get back in the fight, right? To not be a sissy, were told to suppress their emotions as well. And now they're struggling as adults. They're struggling with their career. They're struggling with their physical health. They're struggling with their mental health. Think about the suicide rates, the heart problems that men have in this world, right?
Mm.
And look at the divorce rates, which obviously is not a man's fault entirely. But when you don't know how to communicate emotionally, right? When your EQ is very low,
Hmm.
you're going to struggle. So that's what brought me to men's work. I had to figure it out for myself. And now I'm bringing men back to their truth, which is not only physical strength, which is always a part of who we are in our DNA, but also our emotional strength.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot right there. Um, I I do agree with you. I think our society, I think men in general, maybe is because of media. I'm not really sure, why, but I do think that men are taught to not show emotions, right? Like I think you have a good relationship. Like like me and Edwin will actually say like I love you, bro, with each other, right? But like I don't think that's normal. Like I think so. Why do you think? Because you're not alone. Like I feel like a lot of men, especially in America, I think. Do you think it's different in like European countries and other countries?
There might be some disparity in some countries where they're more of a family culture, but I don't think so. I don't think there's a big variation, right? Men are men. We try to live up to a stereotype that might not be accurate. When you think about being a man, it's also very much about being a human, right? We all have different energies running through us, and there's a time and a place to exercise all of those sort of archetypes, if you will. You have to know when to be emotional to support someone else, like your significant other. You have to know when to be physically so strong to protect your family, right? You're sort of plugging and playing, but when you're only playing with a small amount of cards and you don't have a full deck, you're going to suffer. Because when you need to pull out that ace in the hole, to support your child who's going through a tough emotional distress, or to support your partner, you can't pull that card,
Hmm.
and you're stifled and you're stuck and you're paralyzed and you're afraid, right? It's the same thing as if you're weak and you never work on your body, or you're obese. And now all of a sudden, as someone's trying to attack your family, how do you pull that card, right? We need to be fully rounded, integrated men. And part of that is being able to deal with our emotion. Now, think about that in business, Davidson, right? If you want to close 7-figure deals, if you want to be $1 million W-2 guy or gal, you cannot show up in the presentation and be stoic.
Mm.
No one's going to listen to you. You have to literally move people emotionally. People buy with emotion, right? They rarely buy with logic. So if I can't feel emotion in myself, how am I going to portray emotion so that I can move other people towards a yes? And that's the greatest gift. That's why I've been so successful in business. I
Mm.
get people emotionally involved in buying from me, right? But if I couldn't tap into that in myself, it's a card I can't pull.
But it sounds like it sounded like there was a turning point when you were able to tap into the full deck of cards, right? So was there like a pivotal moment that happened? Because it sounds like because of, you know, your father, you realized like that was something that it took you a while to learn to get over as well.
Yeah. So for me, it was a series of broken relationships, broken engagements, right?
Mm.
Where I finally said, I don't know what I don't know. And I'm starting to feel like I may have a blind spot,
Hmm.
right? So I went inwardly. And this is where the spiritual God piece comes in, right? I think most of us have a curiosity towards a higher power, but many of us are afraid of it, perhaps, or many of us don't really know how to connect. Neither did I, right? But I just started meditating, and I started praying, and I started reading about this stuff and connecting in my body. And as a result, I started actually, first I started passing kidney stones. I had 4 or 5 kidney stones in a row. And I'm going, what's going on? And this was sort of the beginning of this spiritual journey. And then as I sort of purged, released whatever pain and trauma was in my body, I started calming down, relaxing, and connecting with the higher power. And then through that, I started stepping into my own power slowly. I started feeling emotion and literally trembling, convulsing, and releasing trauma that I swear to you, I did not know was there. I'm going, I haven't cried in 20 plus years. Why can't I stop crying? Literally. And this was going on for months and months and months. And then finally, I got to a place where I said, wow, I did not recognize that there was this energy within me that I had untapped. And I am not joking you when I say this. My income tripled almost overnight.
Wow.
Because once I started connecting, I started saying, what else can I do with this unfound energy? And then that's when like manifestation comes in. And a lot of people might say, well, this is a little woo woo, right? This is a little new age.
Hmm.
Trust me, if you open up that door, because life is about opening up doors, right? There's always something behind that door.
Hmm.
And when you do, there's an incredible power. You got to be patient, you got to be consistent, and you got to be incredibly inquisitive and earnest about trying to connect with that. So that's the other part of my coaching. It's combining the physical with the metaphysical, if you will.
That's fascinating. So it sounds like so a lot of people hold in trauma through, you know, sometimes it's a tightness in the stomach, or everyone has a lot of different places where they held it. So yours sounds like it was so bad that you even had kidney stones from it.
Yeah, I had kidney stones. I have spinal fusion surgery from the bottom of my neck to the bottom of my spine. Was it surgery that I needed? I think it's debatable. I think I was so in pain when I was young, and the doctor said, you have curvature of the spine. You might need the surgery. And I said, let's do it tomorrow,
Wow.
because I wanted to feel something. And to this day, I couldn't believe how calm and willing I was to get to have this surgery, where I had to sign a waiver that said, you might die. Major surgery, spine, right? Connected to your brain. So my body, think about how tight my body has been since the age of 19 years old, right?
Yeah.
Everything was stiff. My back was like a shield. My heart was filled with armor, right? My breathing was shallow. I would never even breathe appropriately. Everything was completely stiff and numb. I was intimate. Sometimes I wouldn't be able to feel my body. I was in my head. If you talk to me at a party, you'd be like, this guy's pretty smart. He knows a lot. Yeah, because reading and absorbing knowledge to justify my own beliefs
Hmm.
was really simple. But at the end of the day, think about this. I don't care if you're a man or a woman or a dog or a sheep, right? Life is about feeling. When you go to the beach, you're not thinking, what a beautiful sunset. You're
Right.
feeling that sunset, right? When
Mm.
you go through life, if you can't, if when you're at a concert and the music is playing, you're feeling the vibration of the music.
Right.
If you cut yourself off from that, you'll never be able to have meaningful connections or influence people in a way that also benefits you.
Yeah. That's interesting because what are your thoughts on this? Because I do think there are some successful salespeople that are very like analytical, that are very like, you know what I mean? So it's interesting because sometimes I'm like, huh, like how does that person close so many deals? But because I do see some successful salespeople that are very like in my opinion they seem very boring, like not very emotional, but then they still are able to close a lot of deals.
Yep. Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's no one size fits all, right? Like, sure, you could be analytical and close deals. My question would be, is that salesperson leaving any money on the table?
You're
Number
saying
one.
connecting with other archetypes.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's being well rounded. And the other question I would have is, are they that analytical in their personal life? You know,
Mm,
maybe they could turn it on and off and go home
hmm,
and be emotional. But at the end of the day, we still have to connect as humans, heart to heart. We still have to we have to be able to, when you watch a movie and you leave that movie and you go, that was an incredible movie. I was moved. Whether it's a horror movie, whether it's a love story, whether it's an action film. You have to feel it. You have to be moved by it. So yes, being analytical helps in many aspects of life, and sure, it's a facet of sales.
hmm.
But when you bring in that power of that emotion, right? And by the way, I wanted to say as a caveat, uh, I think the misdefinition of masculinity is the opposition to anything that's feminine, right? Because if your definition of what's feminine is off, then your definition of masculinity is off.
Hmm.
Let me give you an example. If I had a group of 12-year-old boys in front of me right now, and I said, okay, which one of you guys are the sissy in the group? I'd create a war, right? They'd all be pushing each other and pointing at each other, right?
Yeah,
So from a young age, we're like, if it's feminine, I don't want anything to do with it.
totally.
Sort of like an old, I don't like to use the word toxic, but outdated definition of masculinity. So
Mm.
now if I say to a man, be vulnerable, and they go, vulnerable, that sounds feminine to me. Or you know what? Why don't you try being a little more emotional about this? Emotional. That sounds like feminine to me. And right off the bat, you're never going to explore that side of yourself. And let's be honest, emotion could be leaders. Some great leaders are emotional. Think about the best speeches. Was Martin Luther King emotional? I dare you to watch that speech again. The I Had a Dream speech. If you're not moved by that emotion, you're dead, right?
Yeah,
All these great leaders, right? Winston Churchill, Theodore Roosevelt, Barack Obama, you saw them stand at podiums and cry. It is not weakness.
yeah.
There's power. You can't do it every day when you come home and cry to your partner, right? There's got to be a balance, but knowing when to tap into it is the point.
Hmm. That's interesting. So, yeah, I read this book called The Mask of Masculinity. I don't know. Have you
That's
read that with Lewis Howes?
Those cows, yeah.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me, and I gifted that to a lot of different people, a lot of men. And one of the takeaways I remember from that was that we all have different masks, right? There's like the jock mask, there's the joker mask where you kind of laugh your pain away. There's like different ones. Is like do you know, like it sounds like people and inherently they have different stages, right? So you can be more than just one, but is there one that resonated with you that you were before you started doing this work? And would love to learn more about the program that got you more into this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the archetype for me was the Joker.
Mm,
I rebelled, right, because I wasn't getting the attention as a child because my sister demanded it. So my way to get attention was to sort of peacock and become the class clown,
hmm,
right? I was constantly suspended from school. I had anger issues. I was in detention every day, so I couldn't play sports, and this was my way of acting up,
yeah.
right? So that's what I did for many, many years, until I probably hit my 30s, where I started to become a little bit more serious. But then in my 30s, maybe late 20s, I developed the sort of Don Juan persona, the womanizer persona. I can't remember the exact term for it. It doesn't really matter. But that's when I started dating with ego.
Huh.
I just went from woman to woman, and I wasn't able to develop real relationships. When they got close, I became really aloof. So that went on for a number of years. Just that numbness, right? I was with women, but I wasn't with women, right? I wasn't consciously dating. And then I think I woke up. I mean, to be honest, it's pretty recent where I said, wait a minute, I think that I want a more balanced life. How do I get that? What do I need to do? What do you got to work on? I'd be like, nothing. Everything's fine. That's a man's mantra. I'm fine. Everything's good.
Yeah.
What do you mean you want to talk? We don't need to talk. We're guys. Let's go throw the ball around. I would literally say that. I'm fine. People have it worse than me. I can't complain, right? And even though that might be true, people have it worse than me, that's always the case. That doesn't mean, that's not an excuse for not doing the inner work on yourself. You got to go deep within your soul and ask yourself, what's blocking me and preventing me from getting the life that I desire?
Hmm. Was there like was there a men's program or men's group that helped you explore inner, because I feel like there's a lot of programs out there, because like how does one even know where to go, right? Because I feel like, this is a relatively newer thing. Like I didn't even know about any of this until like maybe in 2 3 years 4 years ago, but I feel like it's becoming like okay now for men to even talk about some of these issues and things that they want to work on.
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially for your audience. There's a couple of really great men's groups. Two that have come to mind are Everyman
Oh yeah.
and Mankind Project.
Yes. Yeah.
And those are very good. I've been to a couple of Everyman. So a lot of their messages around what we're talking about.
Right.
And the truth is, it's just men getting together and holding each other accountable, right? Beyond that, I've gone to other ones like Sterling, a couple on the West Coast that were really good. I found a mentor at one of them who I speak to every day, every Sunday. He's 70 years old, and his life trajectory up until 43 has been exactly mine.
Wow.
And when I met him, there was 70 men in the men's group, and somehow we connected. So talk about synchronicity. When people are like, I don't believe in all that stuff. How else do you explain something like that? I could have met another guy who got married at 20 years old and has trouble with, wife and kids. I met a guy who went through that same trajectory I just explained, the Joker to the womanizer to finally at 50 years old, he got married. And through his lessons and his stories, I've accelerated my own learning and my own growth. And now I run my own men's groups, right? Especially now, I just started one yesterday to help with this COVID. Because again, if men are sitting in their home for 3 weeks, quarantine, especially if they're single, going, no, no, I'm good. No, I'm fine. This stuff doesn't affect me. It's probably a lie. How
Yeah.
can it not be when thousands of people are dying, when you
Right.
can't see your family, when you can't connect, when you can't have intimacy, right?
Mm.
Of course it's going to come up emotionally, but you got to find a way to get it out of your system and talk to other men and hold each other accountable and just hold space for each other, right?
Yeah, I think so. I've done a couple men's group, and I found it to be very fascinating. And one of the takeaways I've gotten from it, literally just connecting with other men, right? I feel like I can only speak for myself, but it was much easier for me to connect with women most of my life. I lived with, my dad was out of my life. I lived with my two younger sisters and my grandma and my mom. So I was like, and then it was interesting because when I was younger, like I felt like I was only able to connect with like women. So I don't know. Do you think that like I guess a lot of I feel like a lot of men don't even like how does one know that they're because I think a lot of times men don't even know that they're looking for like deeper connection, right? I think they're just okay with the status quo, right? So how does one because I think there has to be some sort of like turning point or pivotal point where they're like, all right, maybe I should look into this a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? Because usually it's rock bottom.
Yeah.
And, when I say men lie, we do, right? Let's be honest. We've been lying since the locker room. We lie about the size of our anatomy. We lie about how many women we've been with. We lie about our prowess in the bedroom, right? We've been lying since like adolescence. But the worst part we do is we lie to ourselves. So
Mm,
to answer your question, I think it usually happens when we can no longer lie to ourselves, when
mm,
we're in so much pain, when we've developed dangerous addictions that are now controlling us, for example, when we lost our relationship because we haven't been able to open up or control our emotions or control our addictions, right? We lose our family, we lose our kids. Loneliness is an epidemic on this planet, and it's usually related to men. Men are very lonely because we isolate. Women don't generally isolate. They go to brunch on Sunday with their friends. We don't do that. You
mm,
know, fantasy football might be the most we bond, and that's not really sitting down with each other. It's usually virtually, right? So we play video games, we watch Netflix, we can isolate very easily. So I
right.
think what happens is we get to a point where it's like something is surfacing in my body and I don't know how to deal with it anymore, and my back's against the wall. And if I don't do something, I'm going to wind up in the hospital because the stress is overtaking my body, or I'm going to do something perhaps dangerous to myself, or I'm going to go back to a dangerous addiction. At that point, men usually say, where can I go? Is it a therapist? Is it a coach? Is it other men? When they're introduced to this by like a mentor or someone that they meet, they're usually at the very least very curious because, as you said, you're yearning for that.
Yeah.
It's nice to be around women. I love being around women, but the truth is, I can't have the same conversations,
Mm,
right, that I could have with other men, honest conversations about the burden that men can carry, right?
yeah.
We
A lot
have a burden as well.
Yeah. So, oh, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, I think the societal pressures is something that definitely resonates with me. I think, I mean, obviously, women have their own burdens to deal with, right? That's obvious. But I think one of the things I've noticed is that men have to kind of like like a lot of times it's like financially, right? They have to take care of the family, or they don't have to, but I think there's a lot of societal pressures, and especially in other countries where the man is like has to do it, right? Where at least I feel like right now in our society there's a little bit more more of a balance, but it's still like I feel like we still have a lot of pressures to you know whether it's like physically we have to look good, right, or whatever the case may be. um so no, that's an interesting. What advice would you give to people, because I do know a lot of men who let's say like I feel like they're addicted to like sex, but then they're not able to connect with women on that level. It's more of just like for them it's it's like a filling a void almost.
Yeah, the advice I have is tell the truth, right? At the end of the day, there's all these movements. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Men going their own way, MGTOW,
Hmm.
right? The pickup artist scene. There was a book written by Neil Strauss called The Game years ago.
Yeah.
That's still a big movement. All these men's movements that I think are rooted around anger towards women, right? It's a lie. It's a fabrication of the truth. Because the reality is, you don't want sex. You probably want love,
Mm,
right? If you're really being honest, show me a man that has endlessly been with women and doesn't feel somewhat empty. Show me him. I mean, I've had some of that experience for a while. It doesn't have lasting satisfaction. And the one thing we all have in common is our desire for intimacy, love, and connection. And if you don't believe that, look around right now in the midst of this COVID. All of us are yearning for some sort of human connection. We
yeah.
need it. That's how we're built. So what I would tell men is tell the truth. And sometimes in my coaching sessions, I ask a question and I hear something and I'm like, no, what's the truth? What's beyond that? What's behind that anger? What's behind that shame? And it's usually the desire to be held, to be loved, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood.
Mm. But I feel like that's like a very transformed, like I feel like not a lot of people like people have to go through something, right? Whether it's hiring a coach or because I do think that a lot of people like don't even know that they're yearning for, love, or, maybe it's like they didn't have a father growing up or their parents divorced or whatever. So I guess like I know you mentioned Mankind Project. Is there a book that you would recommend, like if someone is more interested in this type of thing?
Yeah, I like that you challenged me on that question because you're right. Before telling the truth, you need someone to help extract the truth. You need help. And and again, this is another thing that men do. We don't ask for directions, right? We don't ask for help. We
Yeah.
don't do that. We'll figure it out ourselves. It'll take us 4 days to put the IKEA furniture together, but no, my wife cannot help me. I'm going to do this, right? So think about how that goes into the emotional landscape. We
Right.
don't really go to therapy. The self-help industry is like a $14 billion industry.
Yeah.
70% of the consumption is women,
Oh,
right?
really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's not something that comes natural to us. But again, when your back's against the wall, find a good therapist.
Hmm.
Find a good coach that focuses on the things you're challenged with. Lean on other men. Find men's groups. They're everywhere, and there's a revolution happening. It's real, right? So I would say yes, absolutely seek help.
No, this is a pretty awesome conversation. I think so. I think one of the things that because even in sales culture, right? Sometimes it's like a very macho culture,
Yeah.
right? Like I've been a part of sales, or especially in financial services, right? It's sort of like, like people will make a lot of like dick jokes or just like stupid, like it's a very masculine culture. And I honestly I hated that. Like I hated being a part of a sales culture where like the guys would just like do stupid things, go to a happy hour and just like, oh, who can pick up the most women, or like how, like I'll give you $5 to ask for that girl's phone number, just like stupid stuff like that, right? So if someone is in that situation, what how does one like get out of that? Because I feel like too often, like I've been part of so many sales orgs. Luckily, LinkedIn is not like this, but it's like stupid where like the guys are just doing stupid things, and you're just kind of like, man, like I don't even know what to do because it's just so ingrained in some of these cultures. A lot of sales orgs.
Yeah, and interesting point, and I feel that too, right? Because there's certainly a peer pressure around that.
Yeah.
The peer pressure around men gathering together in groups is powerful, right? And that's why I talked about earlier, the lies perpetuate because it's like, well, I can't say I didn't get laid for 3 months. I'm gonna look like a sissy. So I'm
Right.
gonna make up this woman that I had sex with last night just to look cool,
Right.
right? So it's this poker night banter that men need to sometimes design because they're afraid to be honest. Here's what I would say: authenticity goes a long way, right? And when you can own your truth, but you have to own it. You can't tell the truth. You got to sometimes own it, right? And you can say, hey, look, man, I'm on a 60-day no alcohol cleanse because I'm working on getting healthy. I'm going to the gym at 6 a.m. So you losers can hang out at the bar and do shots of tequila all night, but
Mm.
I'm going to be at the gym in the morning, going to bed. Good night. Sort of hard to argue with that. It's hard to argue with a man that's committed, disciplined, and willing to sacrifice something that everybody knows is toxic for something that everybody knows is healthy. But you got to really own it. You can't be like, well, I'm thinking about maybe getting up for the gym in the morning. I mean, men will pounce on weakness. Got to own that truth, right?
That's a good point. So I think finding being authentic is the best way. But I do think, I don't know. I feel like where we are, like I feel like it took a long time and it took a lot of work to get to where we both are, right? Like me, you, and Edwin, people that are like constantly putting themselves out there and just being extremely vulnerable. But I do think the bulk of society, at least like most of my friends, like don't even have these conversations, right? They're kind of just like, let's go to the bars, get shit faced, or like I feel like I don't know. Like I think that a lot of men like want to like find love and want to have like a deep, intimate like a relationship, but I feel like a lot of them still just go through the motions, and then a lot of times like they reach an age where they're like shit, like I don't know why I spent so much time trying to chase tail when in actuality like I think a lot of people aren't really sure what to do, or they're not quite that they haven't reached enough pain for them to like make the change of like going to see a therapist.
Yeah, everyone's on their own journey, and their self-realization comes at different times, right?
Yeah.
Um, my advice, it almost comes up invariably with every coaching session.
Hmm.
The first thing that comes up is slow down, right? Let's slow down time. Let's stop running around. What don't you need to do for the next couple of weeks to maybe come to some more self-realization, right? Can you stop obsessively dating? Can you stop obsessively looking at pornography for a couple of hours a day? Can you stop gaming for a couple of days? What can you cut out so
Hmm.
that we can go deeper and see what comes up? Because the truth is, when you do slow down and you take your phone and you throw it on the couch and not deal with it for a couple of hours,
Hmm.
you're forced to sit there with your truth, with
Mm.
your thoughts, with your emotions. And if you get very intentional about it and say, you know what, with the free time that I carve up with myself, I'm going to ask myself some questions. I'm going to feel what's going on in my body, right? Maybe I'll write it down. Oh, heaven forbid, right? And start doing that. They call it work for a reason. How the oldest words I think in the English dictionary are probably know thyself, right? How do you really know yourself unless you reintroduce yourself to you, right? Go in and see, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? What am I running away from? Maybe there's nothing. Maybe you're just young and want to go fool around with women. That's cool, right? But if you're not really happy or satisfied with your life, then it's time.
Yeah. Hmm. That's an interesting point. Because I do think because of COVID, people are having more time to actually deal with whatever it is they're running away from. You can't just go out to bars and get shit faced anymore, right? Like the bars are closed. So I think honestly, this is a great time to do that inner work because I think ultimately, so yeah, actually that's a good question. What do you think someone who is obsessed with porn, like what do you think they're actually running away from? Like what do you think they actually want?
Oof. I don't know if it's a black and white answer, Davidson, but I always think that there's something beneath sex, right? Sex is a pleasure, right?
Hmm.
It's a shallow pleasure. It's, even if you're having casual sex, it's sort of like using somebody for masturbation. Usually, if there's alcohol involved and, you know, you don't know each other's bodies and there's no buildup. So I think there's like anything in life, there's a quality of activities and there's a low quality of activities, right? High and low. And I think pornography is a very low vibration. I think it's a low quality activity that drains a man of his power. You're
Hmm.
literally releasing semen that can be transmuted. Napoleon Hill talks about this, transmuting that energy towards creative endeavors, towards business, right? And it's funny because women even sense this. If your body's filled with semen and testosterone, women will pick up on it. When you're drained of testosterone, women will pick up on it, right? So it's sort of it's our prana, it's our energy force, it's our life force. And if we drain ourselves 3 times a day of this, we're going to be lethargic, we're going to be tired, we're probably going to be irritable, right? And then when we have an opportunity with a woman that we may like, guess what happens? Oh, here's performance anxiety,
Hmm.
here's erectile dysfunction, here's I can't finish, right? And how else do you explain in today's day and age teenagers having erectile dysfunction at rampant rates? How do you explain that? That's never happened before. I promise you.
Mhm.
Men over 40 and 50? Yes.
Right.
Men at 17 years old? No. So the neurotransmitters in your brain are changing physically. They're rewiring when you look at porn. And you're becoming desensitized because your point of view, right? If I look at a woman having sex and I see her entire body
Mhm.
because it's produced, and then I have sex with a woman and I'm looking at her face and I can only feel her body, say in a missionary position, all of a sudden, it's not my hand with my favorite lube and it's not my favorite visual aesthetic angle. So now I'm struggling and I can't figure out why. And the lights aren't on. And this woman wants me to, is pulling me in close and trying to kiss me. And I don't understand this because this is not what I'm used to.
Oh. Hmm.
It's a different perspective and it's widely, dramatically overly produced so that men are feeding into the sort of visible, what do you call it? Stimulation that we desire, right? It sort of turns us on. But think about this. Has there ever been a porn where like there's a conversation between a man and woman about like paying the bills and that leads to sex? No, it's like women don't even talk usually in pornography. They
Right.
go right into the scene.
Right.
Now you're in a relationship and your girl's in sweatpants and she doesn't have makeup on and she's crying because maybe she's going through, her monthly menstruation. And a guy's like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the basement and look at some women with fake boobs, fake ass, hair extensions, fake eyelashes. And guess what? Comparison is the mother, right? It's usually the mother of all separation.
Mhm.
The beginning, as soon as you start comparing your real life woman, right, who can't live up to those expectations, to
Mm.
what you're seeing on porn, your relationship will start to dissolve. So, how many relationships have been destroyed because of pornography? How many sexual addictions are related to porn?
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting. That's an interesting topic. I think that our society. Well, I feel like the media, and I feel like media has like such a powerful like influence on both sides, right? Because I do think like even like Hollywood and portrays like a certain type of like man, and I think sometimes actually like that hurts us, right? Because it's like some of it, it's like not even realistic, right? So I do see it from like their perspective as well, right? Because I do think there's a lot of like celebrities that women are like comparing their husbands or their partners with, and it's like there's no way I could compete with Brad Pitt, you know?
Right. Right.
This is interesting to see the power of media and how it really does like impact so much of our lives.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and what's real, right? I'm just fascinated with this idea of illusions and Hollywood. I mean, I lived in Hollywood for about 3.5 years. It is an illusionary town.
Mm.
No one, you don't know what you're looking at, what is real and what's not. Even if someone does look like that, they don't have the jobs that you and I have. Their job is to look good. So they work out 4 times a day.
Right.
It's not real world, right? So we just have to be careful about buying into what media gives us and believing it, right? Because it's manufactured. It's like listening to some pop singer and going, "Wow, she's so talented." Yeah, rip out all the production and see if she could really sing, right?
Right.
That's kind of how life is. What's behind the veil? What's behind the mask, as you put it, or Lewis House puts it, right?
Yeah. Huh. No, these are some good so would love to kind of like dive in a little bit deeper into, because I heard a lot of people talk about like the Mankind Project. So what are some of the takeaways or what are some of the realizations that you've had from being a part of that community? Because it's something that honestly I don't think a lot of men even know about. I've only heard about it because I went through this other coaching program called Accomplishment Coaching, and I met some of the coaches from there. I went through that, and then we had dinner, and then they were sharing with me about the man. They were like, "Oh, you should do that program. I think you would enjoy it." But yeah.
Yeah, I would say my biggest takeaway is I think it's great. First of all, I think it's amazing that men could get together and be non-judgmental, right? Hold confidentiality and support each other like a tribe. right? Because modern men don't have the luxury of tribes. There's no indoctrination into masculinity, right? There's tribes in the Amazon where they send boys, 8-year-old, 9-year-old boys out into the woods by themselves for days. And they got to put their arm in a nest of bullet ants. Okay. If you look up the pain index, I can't remember how they monitor it, but let's just say it's 1 to 10. Bullet ants are the top of the 10.
Oof.
One bullet ant bite. These kids in the Amazon tribe are putting their arm and they have to hold it there for minutes. Okay. So not until they could survive in isolation and not until they could put their arm in that nest can they come back to the tribe and be considered a man. Now, that might be extreme, but in today's day and age, we don't have that, right? You have your father, if you're lucky to have him in the house, which in today's day and age is becoming less common. And then you look at this man and go, okay, that's my example of a man. As a boy, that's what you know. And if he sucks at it, you're going to suck at it.
Right.
So I think the reason why these men's groups are so good is because men have to relearn what it means. They have to redefine masculinity, and to do that around 20 other men and figure it out for yourself. I mean, honestly, Davidson, I've seen men, you ever see like The Exorcist, the
Hmm.
horror movie?
Yeah.
I've seen that happen in real life. Maybe not the head spinning around and the green face and the vomit, but I've seen men exorcise demons in front of me.
Wow.
And when I first went there, I was very closed, remember? And I'm going, what the hell is this?
Hmm.
Men crying, right? Hugging each other. What is this? Right? This was my old shit. And then at times you would see one man fighting off 12 other men. The anger and the rage, maybe from ancestors before, that needed to be cleared.
Wow.
I'm talking about 12 grown men trying to hold this guy down. I've seen that happen multiple times. So suppressed emotion can kill you, okay?
Wow.
Suicide rates in this country are all men. Look at the mass shootings. We had more mass shootings last year than days in the year.
Wow.
How many of those were young men or men?
Most of them, right?
All of them except one, I believe.
Wow.
Okay. So to say that men aren't struggling is ignorant in my view. So these groups create a container of safety and they create a container of conversation and growth.
Mhm.
And in that moment when you feel safe and you got to exercise a demon, I haven't done it publicly, but I've done it privately. I did not know those things were living inside me, and it's visceral. It's
Wow.
not in the mind. We're logical. Men are very logical. We're rational. We know how to fix things. We're solution oriented. As you put it, a lot of us are analytical. But when you drop into your body where your true intelligence is, that's where the armor over your wounds lives. And you have to break that armor. And that's what, when you see a 50-year-old man releasing, it's 50 years of pain.
Wow. Huh. That, that's interesting. Yeah, I do think, the suicide rates are just going up. Like men are just, I do think that like men need an outlet too. So what do you suggest are just like simple things that like your average guy can do to be more in touch with his emotions and have an outlet to be able to just talk things through, right? Because I do think sometimes guys don't even know where to go. I think most men don't have like a men's group, really.
Yeah, first off, I don't think I answered your question earlier about the book.
Mm.
So one thing you could do is start with the book. There's one book that's really good called The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. And David Data is very good because he's sort of the first teacher to incorporate masculinity with spirituality, and he talks about purpose. So
Mm.
one thing, it's probably a whole other episode, but the idea of men having purpose, having a meaning to their lives, this is what gets us to wake up in the morning. And it's usually not your family, it's usually not your job, it's usually the unique gift that you have. Like, look what you're doing, right? You're doing this podcast. People are listening, they're learning from it. You feel good doing it. This is your mission. This is your purpose. And you're going to continue to grow and get energized by that, right? It's a beautiful thing. So as men, we need to have a purpose. Like my coaching is my purpose. My sales job is my job.
Mhm.
See? So David Data talks a lot about purpose. And as soon as you recognize what that is, a man will be all of a sudden aligned. You can focus on that and drill towards that, not be lonely, not be isolated, because he's got something to awaken him. But beyond that, I think you need to find, if you can't find a man in your life, whether it be a really good friend, someone in your family, maybe even a coworker, find a mentor. And the idea of a mentor to me for many years confused me. I didn't know. Like, I'm like, what the hell? How do you find a mentor? Do you have to ask somebody if they're going to be your mentor? Literally, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I did. That's what I did. I don't know if it's right or wrong or it happens sort of inherently, but I asked this guy, will you be my mentor? I felt like a little boy. But, but the truth is, it was the best thing I ever did. So if you have a man that you admire, reach out to him. If you look up to him, say, would you be willing to guide me? Because sometimes I feel adrift and I could really use your help. You seem like an incredible man. If you can't do that, find professional help. There's plenty of great men's coaches, including myself. There's a lot of great therapists and psychologists out there that focus on working with men. There's plenty of outlets that you could find.
Yeah, I think the stigma of going to therapy is every year it seems like it's becoming more and more acceptable. But I do think that, I'm sure that the percentage of men who go to therapy is much lower than percentage of women who go to therapy, right?
I'm with you. I would bet.
And do you recommend for people to see a male therapist, or do you think that it's fine to see?
That's a really good question. I think it's up to the individual, and I think it's up to the person's level of expertise. I just think that it's important for men to start communicating with each other. It's so foreign. I hang out with my friends and we wind up busting each other's balls for hours. And
Yeah,
I leave the conversation and I'm like, I don't even know what my friend's doing for work these days.
yeah.
Right? Like, how's his family? I don't know. We were just joking for 3 hours,
Yeah.
you know? So at some point, we gotta like go a bit deeper and learn to actually communicate as mature men
Yeah.
with each other and say, what the hell's going on? How's things? How's your relationship? Okay, you're struggling? Talk about it. I'm here to help. I'm here to listen. How's your job? Right? Think about right now, we're going to be looking at 30% plus employment. There's be a lot of men out of work.
Yeah. And no
We
one's
gotta talk, networking and talking and communicating, right? It's very imperative right now.
that is what about, like, because it's interesting, because even within you saying that, I do notice, like, my old friends, like, before I did all this, like, therapy and work, we talk about, like, like, there's like, and then all the people that I've met through, like, coaching and men's group, it's like totally different conversations, right? Like much deeper, much. So, like, how does one go back to their friends that maybe aren't, have never seen a therapist, like people, because I do notice, like, the stuff I talk about with them is totally different than the stuff I talk about with you.
Yeah, that it's hard. My friends look at me sometimes and like, what the hell happened to Rob? What is this spiritual shit? What is this new age stuff, right? And I'm like, look, this is who I am, right? I grew up. We could talk about who I was at 16 years old, but that's not who I am anymore
Right.
because I was a boy at 16 and now I'm a man. And if you want to continue communicating as boys, that's cool,
Hmm.
but I'm probably going to limit my time with you guys,
Right.
right? Because I'm on a mission. I have my purpose and I want to be around men that can lift me up, right? I want to be around men better than me. Like if you start a job as a salesperson, do you want to be the best salesperson on the team?
Oh yeah. No, that would not be good.
No, I want to be, I want to look around and be like, these guys are big time hitters.
Okay. Yeah.
And I got to step up my game and I'm going to learn from them. It's the same thing with life, right? Like life strategy, if you will. If you're around men that are better than you, you're going to become better. Tony Robbins says you're the average of the 6 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
So I don't want to hang out with my childhood friends every weekend because, sure, once in a while I'll play the game, but you're going to see less and less of me unless you start opening up, right? And talking to me about your life. That's how I view it.
Yeah. Because sometimes I find that where do you find that balance of like trying to lift people up and bring people with you, or when do you just like move on and just like you know what I mean? Sometimes I find myself like I'm like man, like I'm talking much less with some of my friends that just go out and just get shit faced all the time, right? Versus talking with people that are actually like volunteering all the time, doing all doing a lot of these things that I'm much more interested in now. But sometimes I'm like damn, I really haven't spoken to my old friends in years, you know? So sometimes there's like guilt associated with that.
Yeah, I think as we go through life, I think what you just described is incredibly common for most people, right? And sometimes it happens even with family. We outgrow people.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they don't have a place in our lives. Like my friends that I grew up with, they'll always be in my life because they're basically like family. But I don't see them as much as I see people in my men's group, for example, right? So
Yeah.
it's once again, what are you aligned with? If you have a goal, you're a goal-oriented guy, right? You have your goals, you're clear on them, and you're forging ahead. The question then becomes when you take your precious time and you spend it with people socially, is it helping you move ahead or is it pulling you backwards? I think that's the only question you really have to ask yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes it's hard to with that change, right? Because with that change, sometimes you're gonna have to, you're gonna have to move on, right? You're gonna have to adapt. So I think sometimes maybe the reason why I do feel like I need to kind of um just like be there for some of them. But at the end of the day, like if I don't get energy from that and I
Mhm.
don't feel good about myself afterwards, then maybe that's a sign to just listen to myself and trust my instincts and just be like, be okay with it and just accept it and move on, you know?
There's power in that for sure. I admire that.
Yeah. Well, I think this was such an amazing, interesting conversation. Honestly, I think that, with men's suicide rates and men having such huge mental health problems right now, I know I suffered from depression and, I know like going to therapy helped me out so much. And from that, started this journey of just like having these types of conversations and actually meeting with other men who are also going through similar things. Like, I think it's so awesome and I really appreciate what you do and what you do to lift like humanity and there's 3 billion men out there, right? So I love what you're doing and I just want to acknowledge you for just holding that space and being there, creating a vulnerable space where men could just talk these things and kind of process some of these emotions and be able to grow from it is such an amazing thing. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Davidson. I really appreciate the kind words. I appreciate the platform that you gave me to speak about this because I agree with you. I think it's incredibly important. And like I said, there's a revolution happening. And
Mm,
for the women listeners out there, don't say there's not any good men out there because they're out there and they're rising and they're growing and they're becoming more self-aware. And
yeah.
believe me, I'm seeing it happen. It's an underbelly of men that are rising up. So you're either with them or you're not.
That's actually a freaking really great question, actually. So I meet a ton of women who are like, their life mission is to find a good man. And honestly, like, I think I spend at least a couple hours every day talking to like women friends that are just like, dude, like, I just can't seem to find a guy, like what, I mean, I feel like we could probably talk about this for hours.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Uh,
like, what advice would you give them? Because honestly, there's a lot of women that tell me this every day. And I'm just like, I don't know, like, like, like,
yeah.
okay.
It is right. Look, it's not easy because, like you said, men are just waking up to this idea, and
Mhm.
there's probably a couple of your listeners that shut this off 3 minutes in. Right? That's cool.
Most people, yeah.
Yeah, they're right. They're not ready or they don't buy it, and they still are caught in their old ideas. That's fine. But
Right.
there's a ton of men. I'm talking New York City now, right? Especially that are doing the inner work.
Mhm.
They're bonding together like brothers. They're dipping into their spirituality in a big way. And where are they? You got to follow the interests, right? There's workshops in New York. Once this whole thing clears, of course, there's workshops in New York City every day related to different topics. And if you find these wellness retreats, right,
Mm.
you know, there'll still be 70, 80% of women at these things. That's for sure. But the 30% of men that are there are conscious men.
Yeah.
Find them in those workshops, find them at those retreats. They're all over the city. And it's beautiful to see because believe me, they're masculine dudes. They're
Right.
masculine dudes that believe in a higher power. And there's nothing wrong with that. They understand how relationships work, or at the very least, they're learning about it. So keep the faith.
And then a quick question. Have you heard of orgasmic meditation before?
Orgasmic meditation. No, tell me what that is.
It's a really fascinating,
Very curious.
huh?
I'm very curious.
Yeah, I thought you would be. I feel like you would definitely vibe with that community. I went through this, dude, like myself searching, soul searching. I was introduced to a friend who invited me out to this event, and it was incredible. It was called orgasmic meditation. I'm like, how does someone say no to an event like that, right? So I went there, and it was like in Chelsea, and then they rented like a warehouse of like, it was like 100, and it was a lot of people. And I didn't like read, I didn't Google it, I didn't look it up or anything. I just tried to go to it with like an open mind, and it was so fascinating. So there's like 100 and something people watching, and then there's like the instructor, or like the head. She was the founder of orgasmic meditation, and she's literally like rubbing this woman's like clitoris for like 10 minutes, and everyone's just watching. And then you just say what's on top of your mind, like no filter, right? So you could just like kind of like just speak your truth. So like there'd be people that would say things like, oh, like my clitoris is getting wet, or oh, I'm getting hot down there, or like like you just say what's on your mind, whatever, right? So you just hear like everyone just saying whatever with no filter. It's a pretty fascinating experience, actually. But
Wow.
it was almost like a spiritual connection, because all of us were kind of like, the energy of like 100 plus people in the room was like palpable, right? And then the person who's like kind of like the the end of this receiving, they talk about, and then afterwards you kind of like debrief, and you're like, what was going through your mind, what, and they were just like, yeah. And then they kind of described that whole experience, like what it was like for them.
Mm.
People afterwards, like, you go around and people talk about like, what, like what how is your experience, and people would just be like, oh, there's a brief moment of like 5 seconds where I actually felt like peace, or I felt like inner clarity, or there was, like there's like a connectedness.
Mm.
But it was a fascinating experience, but I thought you would be interested in something like that.
Well, I mean, it's definitely interesting on both a physical and a spiritual level. But yeah, you did say that. You said it felt very spiritual, and and,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just tie a bow on the conversation of sex, right? Sex is spiritual. It's cosmic. If you've really had incredible intimacy, you will know it's spiritual. It
Mm.
transcends the body.
Right.
And what I tell a lot of men that come to me that have intimacy issues, which I had for a long, long time,
Mm.
and that could be performance anxiety, erectile dysfunction, or whatever, like we talked about earlier. You could try to demystify what that is, Davidson, right? Oh, change your diet. Maybe it's low testosterone, blah, blah, blah. Even pornography, right? The truth is, I believe it's your soul speaking to you. Your soul is speaking to you, telling you, you are not built for drunk, meaningless, empty sex with a stranger.
Yeah.
And if you keep doing it, we're going to shut down. And at some point, you got to recognize that having intercourse with a partner, woman or man, depending on your orientation,
Hmm.
is something that is sacred for most people. And when you hold it sacred and your partner holds it sacred, guess what? It becomes sacred.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so much better when you have that deep, intimate. When you have been in a relationship for a while. It's so different than having like a one night stand. Like it's like not even, you can't even compare, right? It's such a
Mhm.
big difference.
And when you have it, to go back to it, it's like having a diet, an alkaline diet filled with beautiful raw vegetables and grass-fed meat, and then going back to eating Doritos every night or McDonald's.
Good analogy. Yeah.
Right? It's junk food for the body.
Mm.
that's why as you get older, you start shedding that because your body's waking up going, no more.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, no, this is certainly one of the most like interesting conversations I've ever had on my podcast. So
I'm flattered.
will appreciate that, especially because I do think men are coming to a point where they're curious and they want to connect with other men and they want, and honestly, for me, it took me a while to finally like be able to connect with men, like I think ever since I started going to therapy, ever since I started kind of healing the past, and then I realized like, wow, I was like shooting myself in the foot essentially. But now, I definitely feel like that. So that's amazing that you're doing this amazing work. Thank you so much for everything.
My pleasure, Davidson. Thank you for the time. Really, this was a lot of fun. And I appreciate, like I said, I appreciate the platform. This is important stuff. And I'm glad that you're putting this out.
You to learn more about, men's coaching, or they're just curious, like how would you suggest for people to reach out to you?
Yeah. So RJ Coaching NYC or robertjosephcoaching.com. RJ Coaching NYC is my Instagram tag and Robert Joseph Coaching on Facebook. I'm out there and I'm available if anybody needs to talk. I know these are tough times, right? So like I said, there's no shame in asking for help. I have a coach myself. Trust me. We all need coach. Tony Robbins has a coach. We all do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'll link to all of your social media and your website and everything. Oh, your website looks amazing, by the way. Just wanted to say
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Davidson, thanks so much. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Be safe. Bye bye.
Thanks.